am lying here in the dark, her fingers still tracing lazy circles on my chest. Even though she's 22 years younger than me, the weight of every honest judgment is crushing my ribs like a slow, invisible hand that won't let go, pressing harder with every breath I try to take. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Or maybe this is the video I never thought I'd post, the one I keep deleting in my head before I even hit record. 6 months ago I was freshly divorced, lonely in a way that hollowed me out from the inside, the kind of empty that makes the walls of your own house feel like they're closing in tighter with every single breath you manage to draw. I was convinced I'd never feel wanted again, never feel that quiet spark that reminds you you're still alive somewhere under all the wreckage of what used to be your life. Then she walked into my life, and everything I thought I knew about right and wrong started to blur at the edges, like ink bleeding on wet paper until the words no longer made sense. I was still raw from the divorce, sleeping in the guest room because the silence in the master bedroom felt like drowning. Slow, endless, pulling me under every night until I woke up gasping for air that tasted like regret. She was my best friend's daughter, home from college for the summer, suddenly sleeping just down the hall like some kind of quiet miracle I didn't ask for and definitely didn't deserve. That first night I heard her laugh through the thin walls, light, effortless, cutting through the quiet like warm light through thick fog. Something in me cracked open, a small fracture that let in too much feeling all at once. Too fast, too dangerous. I lay there staring at the ceiling, heart beating too loud in my ears, a ceiling, telling myself it was nothing, just a familiar sound from someone I'd known forever, someone who used to fall asleep on the couch during movie nights with her head in my lap while her dad and I talked about nothing important. And it kept widening with every soft sound she made on the other side of that wall, every little sigh or rustle of sheets that reminded me she was close enough to reach if I let myself. I'd known her since she was a kid, watched her grow up at family barbecues where the smoke from the grill mixed with her laughter ringing out across the yard, helped her with math homework at the kitchen table while her dad grilled outside and called out those terrible jokes that always made her groan but smile anyway. Let her cry on my shoulder when her first boyfriend broke her heart. Her small frame shaking against me, tears soaking through my shirt as I patted her back awkwardly, trying so hard to be the steady one, the safe one, the uncle who fixed things. She used to call me Uncle Mark with that bright, trusting voice that made me feel like I mattered in someone's world, like I was solid ground when everything else felt shaky. Now, every time she says my name, it sounds different. Dangerous, like a secret chest esting on her tongue, letting it linger just a little too long in the air between us. Innocent and warm, her arms around my neck for just a second too long before she pulled away laughing, her hair brushing my cheek like a promise I didn't understand then. I remember thinking how fast time moves. How one day she was the little girl chasing fireflies in the backyard, and the next she was standing there with eyes that held questions I wasn't ready to answer. I didn't know it was already pulling us towards something I called it named, something that made the air feel heavier whenever she was near, thicker, charged with a current I kept pretending was there. Mornings started innocently enough, or at least that's what I told myself while my pulse betrayed me every single time. She'd pad into the kitchen in an oversized t-shirt that skimmed her thighs, hair messy from sleep, asking if I wanted coffee with that sleepy smile that made the air feel heavier, thicker, like it was holding its breath right along with me. I'd catch myself staring at the curve of her bare legs and immediately look away, heart hammering with guilt so sharp it tasted like metal in my mouth, a bitter reminder of every line I was supposed to respect, every boundary society draws so clearly in black ink. "You okay, Mark?" she'd ask, tilting her head just slightly, her voice soft and curious, wrapping around me like warm fingers I couldn't shake off, and I'd lie through my teeth while the space between us grew thicker. Charged, like the moment before lightning when the sky holds its promise of storm, dark and electric. I'd mumble something about work, grip my mug too tight until my knuckles whitened, feeling the heat from her body even though we weren't touching, as if the inches between us had their own magnetic pull, drawing me in against every warning screaming in my head. Every morning the same quiet war inside me. This is wrong, she's barely 20, I'm 42, society would crucify me if they knew, would whisper behind closed doors about how I should know better, How a man my age has no business noticing the way her skin catches the morning light filtering through the blinds. But her presence filled the house with something alive again, something warm and breathing that chased away the cold silence I'd been living in 4 months after the divorce papers dried and the house felt too big and too empty. Something I hadn't felt in years, and God help me, I didn't want it to leave, even as the shame burned low in my stomach like a slow ember that refused to die. I'd known her family forever. Her dad and I went way back, shared beers and bad jokes through marriages and kids and everything in between, the kind of friendship that feels like bedrock until the ground starts shifting under your feet without warning. She was always there in the background, the little girl who'd run up for piggyback rides, her small hands gripping my shoulders as she squealed with delight, then the teenager who'd roll her eyes at our dad jokes but still laugh anyway, that bright sound cutting through the noise like sunlight. I never thought twice about it back then. Until now, until the way she moved through my house felt like gravity, pulling me closer without asking permission, making every room feel smaller and warmer when she entered, the air shifting around her like it belonged to her now. I'd sit on the couch pretending to read the news on my phone while she stretched out nearby, her foot accidentally brushing my calf under the blanket, that tiny contact sending electricity up my leg like a live wire I couldn't disconnect no matter how hard I tried. I'd freeze, pretending I didn't feel it, pretending I was already counting the hours until the next accidental brush, the next shared glance that lasted a heartbeat too long, heavy with something neither of us named. The guilt would rise then, hot and heavy, reminding me of all the reasons this pull was dangerous. My best friend's daughter, the age gap that yawned like a chasm society loves to point at and judge harshly. The way people would look at me if they knew the thoughts I shoved down every time her vanilla scent drifted past me in the hallway, sweet and tempting and completely off limits. Every night I'd lie in bed telling myself this is wrong, repeating it like a prayer or a curse, over and over until the words lost meaning. Shess, barely 20. I'm 42, the voices in my head were loud. Society would call me a predator, a dirty old man, someone who should know better than to let his eyes linger where they don't belong, where they never should have wandered. Parting words still echoed sometimes. How I was emotionally unavailable, how I never really saw her, how I'd let the years turn us into strangers sharing a house until there was nothing left to salvage. But then I'd remember the way her hand brushed mine when she passed me the remote. Soft fingers lingering just a fraction longer than necessary, warm and tentative like she was testing the same waters I was already drowning in without realizing how deep they ran. The moral voice in my head would get quieter, drowned out by the ache that settled deep in my chest, the kind of hunger that makes you question every choice that led you here, like I'm not just surviving anymore but actually breathing, my lungs filling with something sweeter than air, something that makes the days feel less gray. I'd roll over, punch the pillow hard enough to hurt my knuckles, swear tomorrow I'd keep more distance, build the walls back up before they crumbled completely under the weight of her nearness, but morning would come and there she'd be, humming softly in the kitchen, vanilla coconut drifting down the hall like an invitation I didn't ask for but couldn't stop craving, the scent wrapping around me before I even stepped out of the guest room, pulling me toward the light despite every warning. One rainy afternoon we ended up on the couch watching an old movie, the kind with slow dialogue and rain-soaked streets that mirrored the weather outside, gray and relentless. She curled into my side like she used to as a kid, except now her head rested on my chest, and I could feel her breathing sync with mine, rising and falling in the same unsteady rhythm that made my own pulse stumble. The soft texture of her hair against my arm, the faint coconut scent rising every time she shifted slightly. It made my resolve crumble a little more, like sun slipping through fingers I couldn't close tight enough no matter how hard I gripped. I didn't move away. I told myself it was harmless, just comfort between two people who'd known each other forever, who'd shared so many innocent moments before. And I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin through the thin fabric of her shirt, a gentle heat that seeped into me and made my own skin prickle with awareness I had no right to feel. The rain tapped against the windows like a secret rhythm, matching the unsteady beat of my heart that seemed louder than the movie's soundtrack. Louder than reason, she sighed softly, content, and I forgot how to breathe for a second, the air catching in my throat as the almost moment hung there, heavy, trembling, full of everything we weren't saying, everything the world would condemn if it could see us now in the dim light. She looked up at me during a quiet scene and whispered, You've always taken care of me, but who takes care of you now? Her eyes held mine too long, too deep. Like she was seeing past the man who used to fix her bike and into the one who was barely holding himself together after the divorce left him shattered. I tried to joke it off, something lame about takeout and bad TV, but my voice cracked like thin ice under too much weight, betraying the storm inside. Inside I was screaming, Shess, not a little girl anymore. The way Shess looking at me isn't innocent. It's hungry in the same quiet way I feel, a pull that mirrors the storm building in my chest, unstoppable and terrifying. The air between us thickened until it felt like we were the only two people left in the storm, the rest of the world fading into gray mist. I could smell the vanilla on her skin mixed with the rain on the windows, a sweet contrast that made my head spin slowly, dangerously. My fingers twitched on the couch cushion, fighting the pull to close that last inch, to let my hand brush her shoulder or tuck a strand of her hair behind her ear with a gentleness I shouldn't offer. But I didn't. Not yet. The tension wrapped around us like invisible threads, tightening with every shared breath, every glance that lingered a second too long, promising things we both knew better than to name. And then, as the credits started to roll and the rain kept falling in steady sheets outside, she shifted closer, her cheek pressing lightly against my shirt right over my heart. I felt it racing under her touch, betraying every careful lie I'd been telling myself for weeks. She didn't say anything more. Just stayed there, warm and still, while the movie ended and the room grew darker, the single candle lid lit earlier flickering in the corner like a silent witness to something we both knew was shifting beneath the surface. My mind spun with all the reasons this couldn't happen. My best friend's daughter, and happen. The age difference that would make everyone stare and whisper behind polite smiles. The way society judges these things so harshly, like they know the ache in my chest better than I do, like they understand the loneliness that had swallowed me whole. But her breathing stayed steady against me, soft and trusting, and for the first time in months the loneliness felt farther away, pushed back by the simple weight of her against my side, her warmth seeping in where nothing else could reach. I closed my eyes, telling myself I'd pull back tomorrow, that this was just a moment, nothing more. Nothing that could change everything we'd built over the years. Yet even as I thought it, her fingers found mine on the cushion, not holding, just brushing lightly, and the electricity surged again, stronger this time, harder to ignore. The storm outside kept raging, but the real one was building right here between us, quiet and unstoppable, pulling me under with every slow circle her fingertips might trace later, in the dark where no one else could see, and where I was already afraid I wouldn't want to stop. Mornings in that house started to feel like walking a tightrope over something I couldn't name. She would pad into the kitchen barefoot, that oversized t-shirt brushing the tops of her thighs, hair still tangled from sleep, and ask if I wanted coffee in that soft voice that always carried a little morning rasp. I'd stand at the counter, gripping my mug too tight, forcing my eyes to the window or the newspaper, or anything that wasn't the way the fabric shifted when she reached for the creamer. The air between us grew heavier each day, like humidity before a storm, pressing in until every casual word felt loaded. "You okay, Mark?" she'd ask, tilting her head just enough that a strand of hair fell across her cheek. I'd lie, nodding too quickly, saying something about work or the weather while my pulse hammered in my ears. Guilt sat heavy in my stomach, cold and sharp, reminding me she was barely 20, still figuring out who she was, and I was the man who'd known her since she needed training wheels. But the way she lingered in the doorway after pouring her cup, the faint coconut scent drifting toward me, it made the guilt feel distant, like someone else's problem. I kept telling myself it was nothing. Just the house being too quiet after the divorce, the way empty rooms echo with memories you wish you could erase. She was home from college for the summer, filling the space with her music and her laughter, and I was grateful for the company. Under the hot water that never quite reached the chill inside my chest. But then I'd step out and hear her humming in the kitchen, and my resolve would waver before I even saw her. The simple rhythm of her bare feet on the tile, the way she stretched up on her toes to grab a mug from the high shelf, it pulled at something deep, something I had no right to feel. Days blurred into this careful dance. I'd come home from the office and find her on the couch with her laptop, legs tucked under her, offering me a smile that felt too warm for the room. I'd sit at the other end, pretending to check emails, but every shift of her body sent little ripples through the silence. Once, when she passed me the remote, her fingers brushed mine for less than a second. It was nothing. Just skin against skin in the most ordinary way. Yet I felt it travel up my arm like a spark that refused to die, lingering long after she'd settled back with her knees drawn close. I replayed that moment in my head for hours afterward, lying in the guest room with the lights off. The divorce had left me hollow, convinced I'd never feel that kind of spark again. My ex had pulled away years ago, and I'd convinced myself it was mutual, that we had grown apart like so many couples do. But her touch, even accidental, woke up parts of me I thought were long buried. Why did it have to be her? My best friend's daughter, the girl I'd watched blow out birthday candles and lose her first tooth. Society would look at us and see only the years between us, the power imbalance they love to dissect on late-night talk shows and online forums. They'd call me desperate, predatory, a man using his position to prey on someone too young to know better, and maybe they'd be right. The shame burned low in my gut, but it didn't stop the craving from growing. Nights were worse. I'd lie in bed telling myself this is wrong. Shess barely 20, I'm 42, society would crucify me if they knew. But then I'd remember the way her hand brushed mine when she passed me the remote, and the moral voice in my head would get quieter. Why does her touch feel like the only thing that makes me feel alive again? The ceiling fans spun lazy circles above me, but my thoughts spun faster, looping through every innocent interaction we'd had that day. The way she'd asked about my day at work, really listening, her eyes soft with concern. The way she'd laughed at some silly story I told, the sound light and genuine in a way my marriage hadn't been for years. I hated how much I looked forward to those evenings, how the house felt warmer when she was around. I tried to create distance. I'd leave for the office earlier, stay late at my desk shuffling papers that didn't need shuffling, but she'd text me sometimes. Simple things like, should I start dinner? Or, there's a storm coming, doctor's safe. And each message lit something up inside me, a small flame I couldn't extinguish no matter how hard I tried to blow it out. My best friend would kill me if he knew the thoughts that kept me awake. He trusted me with his daughter, asked me to keep an eye on her while she stayed here. Instead, I was the one who needed watching, the one whose gaze lingered too long when she walked past in those soft cotton shorts, the hem riding up just enough to make my throat tighten. The internal war raged every single day. One part of me, the responsible part that had raised a family and built a career, screamed to stop this before it started. She was family, practically. I'd helped her with science projects and driven her to soccer practice. I was supposed to be the safe adult, the one who offered advice and stability. But another part, the one cracked open by loneliness and rejection, whispered that maybe this was healing, maybe her presence was the medicine I didn't know I needed. Why does society judge age gap relationships so harshly anyway? They paint them as unequal, manipulative, as if age automatically strips away consent or genuine connection. As if they could feel the way her nearness made the emptiness recede like sunlight breaking through clouds after weeks of gray. I told myself I was imagining it. That the tension was one-sided, born from loneliness and too many empty evenings. But the next morning she'd be there again, humming softly while she made toast, and I'd catch myself watching the way sunlight caught in her hair. The hunger in my chest grew quieter during the day, buried under routines, but it never left. It waited, patient and insistent, for the smallest opening. One rainy afternoon the sky opened up without warning, turning the streets to rivers and trapping us inside. We ended up on the couch with an old movie neither of us was really watching, the kind of film we'd seen a dozen times at family gatherings years ago. She curled into my side the way she used to when she was small and scared of thunder, except now her head rested against my chest and I could feel the steady rise and fall of her breathing sissening with mine. The soft strands of her hair brushed my arm, carrying that faint vanilla coconut warmth that always undid me a little more. I didn't move away, couldn't. The rain drummed against the windows like a heartbeat, and the room felt smaller, warmer, the space between us shrinking without either of us saying a word. A mind raced even as my body stayed still. This is wrong on every level, I thought, the words looping like a warning siren. She's not the little girl who used to beg for piggyback rides anymore, but the difference in our years stretches like an ocean society loves to point at and condemn. They'd call it inappropriate, desperate, a midlife crisis wrapped in denial. Yet her warmth seeped through my shirt, chasing away the chill that had lived in me since everything fell apart. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing in the scent of her, telling myself this was harmless, just comfort. Just a people waiting out the storm. The movie played on, dialogue fading into background noise as the rain grew heavier. She shifted slightly, her cheek pressing more firmly against me, and I felt the subtle tremor in my own chest where her head lay. Every breath she took echoed in me, pulling me deeper into the quiet gravity between us. I wanted to say something, anything to break the spell, but the words stuck. Instead, I stayed there, letting the almost touch of her body against mine fill the emptiness I'd carried for months. The guilt twisted sharper, reminding me of all the lines we were inching toward without naming them. But the pull was stronger, a slow current I wasn't sure I could fight much longer. Later that evening, after the rain had eased but the clouds still hung low, we lingered in the living room longer than we should have. She reached for a blanket, draping it over both of us without asking, and the casual way her arm brushed my shoulder sent another wave of heat through me. I swallowed hard, focusing on the screen, but my thoughts kept circling back to the way her presence made the house feel alive again. Society judges these gaps so harshly because they fear what they don't understand, the quiet connection that defies neat categories. But in that moment, with her so close I could count her breaths, the judgment felt far away, like echoes from another life. The obsession grew in the small hours when the house was quiet. I'd replay every glance, every accidental contact, feeling the hunger build like a tide I couldn't hold back. Her touch, it couldn't hold back. Innocent or not, had become the only thing that cut through the numbness. I hated how much I craved it, how my body betrayed me with every quickened pulse. Tomorrow I'd keep more distance, I promised myself. Tomorrow I'd remember who we were supposed to be. But even as the thought formed, I knew it was a lie I was already too tired to believe. The days kept stacking, each one layering more of that unspoken electricity until the air in the house felt charged, ready to spark at the slightest provocation. She never pushed, never said anything that crossed the line, but the way she looked at me sometimes, soft and searching, made the internal war louder. I was supposed to be the steady one, the adult who'd watched her grow. Instead, I felt myself slipping, drawn by the warmth of her nearness like a man lost in the cold too long. The rain had stopped, but the storm inside kept building, slow and relentless, whispering that maybe, just maybe, fighting it wasn't the answer anymore. And then one evening, as the light faded and the house settled into its usual hush, she sat a little closer on the couch again, her knee brushing mine under the blanket. The contact was brief, barely there, but it sent a jolt straight through me, leaving me breathless in the silence that followed. I didn't pull away. The ache deepened, the craving sharpening into something I could no longer pretend was nothing. My mind whispered all the warnings, all the reasons the world would never accept this, but my body stayed rooted, caught in the gravity of her quiet presence, wondering how much longer I could keep pretending this was still innocent. And what would happen when I finally stopped trying? The mornings after that rainy day carried a new weight, every sunrise pulling me back into the same kitchen where the air seemed thinner, harder to breathe. She'd still come in with that sleepy smile, asking about my plans for the day, but now her voice lingered a fraction longer on my name, and I'd find myself answering with questions of my own just to keep her there a little more. Making the coffee taste different, richer somehow, while guilt gnawed at the edges of every shared glance. I wondered if she noticed how my hand trembled slightly when I passed her the sugar, or if she felt the same invisible thread tightening between us with each ordinary moment. Evenings turned into this slow unraveling where I'd sit across from her at the table pretending to read the news on my phone, but really I was memorizing the way light played across her skin when she laughed at something on her screen. The house that once felt too big and empty now seemed to shrink around us, the walls echoing with all the things we weren't saying. I'd catch myself thinking about the age between us again, the 22 years that society would wave like a red flag, calling it wrong, calling it dangerous, as if they could measure the way her nearness made my heart feel less broken. The loneliness from the divorce still sat there, heavy and familiar, but her presence chipped away at it piece by piece, leaving me exposed and aching for more of whatever this was becoming. I tried harder to push back, taking longer drives after work or calling old colleagues just to fill the hours before coming home. But the pull was there waiting, patient as the tide, and when I'd walk through the door she'd look up from whatever she was doing with those eyes that held too many questions and not enough answers. "Rough day?" she'd ask, and the concern in her tone would wrap around me like warm hands I shouldn't want. I'd nod, sit down nearby, and feel the space between our bodies hum with something electric and unspoken. Every time our eyes met a second longer than they should, the internal battle flared hotter. The part of me that knew better screaming about friendship betrayed, about lines that once crossed could never be redrawn, while the other part, starved and desperate, leaned into the warmth like a man dying of thirst. The obsession crept in deeper during quiet moments alone, when I'd stand in the guest room staring at the wall that separated our spaces, imagining the soft sound of her breathing just on the other side. Her touch from those brief encounters replayed endlessly, the brush of fingers or the press of her side against mine on the couch, the whispers about older men and younger women, the assumptions of power and manipulation that ignored how real the connection felt in the stillness of this house. They didn't know the divorce had left me gasping for air, or how her simple presence made the days bearable again. But knowing that didn't silence the shame, didn't stop the trembling in my chest when I thought about how close we were getting without ever naming it. One afternoon, the rain returned, softer this time, turning the world outside into a blurred watercolor while we stayed cocooned inside. We found ourselves back on that couch, the movie long forgotten in favor of old stories from years ago, her laughter filling the room like sunlight breaking through. She shifted closer without thinking, or maybe with every intention, her shoulder resting lightly against mine, and I felt the heat of her through the thin fabric of our clothes, a warmth that spread slowly, dangerously. I didn't shift away. The scent of coconut lingered in the air between us, mixing with the damp earth smelled rifting through the cracked window, and my breath caught in a way that made the room feel even smaller. To remember who I was supposed to be, the trusted friend, the steady uncle figure from her childhood, but her breathing stayed even, calm, pulling mine into rhythm until the guilt and the craving twisted together into one aching knot I couldn't untangle. The days continued like this, each one adding another layer to the tension that hummed beneath every conversation, every shared silence. I'd tell myself in the mirror each morning that today would be different, that I'd keep the interactions brief and safe, but by evening I'd be right back there, caught in the gravity of her quiet company, the way she'd tuck her legs under her when we sat together, the soft sound of her voice when she asked about my past, the way her hair would fall across her face and she'd brush it away with a careless grace. All of it built the obsession until it felt like drowning in slow motion. I knew the world outside would never understand, would judge this age gap with sharp words and colder stares, seeing only the numbers and not the way her nearness filled the voids left by years of emotional emptiness. Yet here I was, unable to quit the pull, the hunger growing with every almost moment that left me breathless and wanting more. The space on the couch between us felt charged with all the things still unsaid, her presence a constant reminder of how far I'd already slipped. And how little I wanted to find my way back. She looked up at me during one of those quiet scenes, the kind where the movie's dialogue fades into background noise and all that's left is the flicker of the screen across her face. Her eyes caught mine and held them longer than they should have, soft but steady, like she was searching for something I'd been hiding even from myself. "You've always taken care of me," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the rain tapping against the window. "But who takes care of you now?" "Mark," the words landed like a spark on dry leaves. I tried to laugh it off, something light and easy to push the moment back into safe territory, but my voice cracked halfway through, betraying the storm building inside. My throat tightened, heat rising under my collar as I shifted slightly on the couch, suddenly aware of how little space remained between us. She wasn't pulling away. If anything, the air felt heavier, charged with all the years I'd spent being the reliable one, the steady presence in her life, now twisted into something I couldn't name without feeling the weight of every judgment waiting outside these walls. Inside, she wasn't that little girl anymore, the one who'd scraped her knee at family picnics and looked to me for comfort. She was here, fully present, her gaze carrying a quiet confidence that made my chest ache with equal parts fear and longing. Society's voice roared in my ears, 42 and 20. Best friend's daughter, the whispers that would label this as wrong, as predatory, as something that could shatter families and reputations in a single breath. I was supposed to protect her, not feel this pull, this gravity drawing me closer when every rational thought screamed to create distance. But her question lingered, hanging there like an invitation I hadn't asked for yet couldn't ignore. I swallowed hard, my hand resting on the cushion inches from hers, close enough to feel the faint warmth radiating from her skin. "I'm fine," I managed, the light tasting bitter on my tongue. "You don't have to worry about me." Yet even as I said it, my pulse quickened, the memory of her earlier brushes against me replaying in vivid detail the way her fingers had grazed mine passing the remote, innocent on the surface but electric underneath. She didn't believe me. I could see it in the slight tilt of her head, the way her breath deepened just a fraction, sissening with the unsteady rhythm of my own. The room seemed to shrink around us, the soft glow from the television casting shadows that danced across her features, highlighting the curve of her cheek, subtle rise and fall of her shoulders. I told myself to stand up, to suggest we call it a night, to remember the lines that had kept us safe for so long. But my body stayed rooted, caught in the almost moment where nothing had crossed over yet everything felt on the verge. The conversation drifted after that, but the undercurrent remained, pulling us through stories of past summers and shared laughs that now carried a different weight. Every word felt layered, every glance a step closer to the edge. I kept reminding myself of the power and balance. The years between us, the trust her family had placed in me, the way the world would see an older man taking advantage rather than two people finding solace in each other's company. The shame burned low in my gut, a constant companion whispering that this hunger was selfish, dangerous, unforgivable. Still, when her laughter bubbled up again at some old memory, light and genuine, it chipped away at my resolve like waves against stone. As the evening wore on and the rain eased into a gentle drizzle, we lingered there, the space between us humming with unspoken possibilities. Her presence had become a lifeline in the quiet aftermath of my divorce, filling the emptiness with something warm and alive. Even as it terrified me, I wondered how long I could keep pretending this was just companionship, just nostalgia, when every fiber of my being ached for more, ached in a way that made the judgments feel distant and irrelevant, even if I knew they weren't. That night, the power flickered and died completely, plunging the house into darkness broken only by the occasional flash of lightning outside. We scrambled for candles, their warm glow casting long shadows across the walls as we settled back into the living room, the air thick with the scent of melting wax and the faint trace of her coconut lotion that seemed to cling to everything now. Hours slipped by in easy conversation at first, trading tales of family gatherings and awkward teenage moments, our voices low to match the hush of the storm. But somewhere in the middle of a story about her first clumsy attempt at baking cookies under my clumsy guidance years ago, the mood shifted. Her hand found its way to my thigh, resting there lightly at first, as if testing the waters, the fabric of my pants doing little to dull the heat of her touch. I froze, breath catching in my chest, every nerve ending suddenly alive and screaming with conflicting signals. Stop this. Don't stop. The internal war raged louder than the thunder rumbling in the distance, society's harsh lens flashing before my eyes. Age gap, family friend, the inevitable accusations of manipulation and imbalance that would paint me as the villain in this narrative. She leaned in closer, her face illuminated by the candle's flame, eyes searching mine with a vulnerability that mirrored my own turmoil. Then, without another word, she closed the distance, her lips brushing against mine in a kiss that started soft and hesitant, like she was afraid I'd pull away. But I didn't. The taste of cherry lip balm mingled with the salt of emotions I couldn't hold back anymore, a single tear escaping as relief and shame collided in my chest. It deepened, becoming something hungrier, more urgent, and in that flickering light, the last threads of my restraint unraveled. We didn't stop there. The pull was too strong, the years of quiet proximity culminating in this moment of surrender. I let her guide me toward her room, the candlelight trailing us like a secret we were both choosing to keep. Her hands moved with a trembling gentleness that made my heart stutter, and wresting the barriers between us while my mind roared with warnings. Everyone will judge you, they'll call this wrong. A betrayal of trust, a stain on everything you've built. Yet her warmth against me felt like an absolution I hadn't turned, chasing away the hollow ache the divorce had left behind, making the emptiness vanish in the shared breath and closeness that enveloped us. In the dim glow, time lost meaning, the world outside fading into irrelevance as we crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The internal struggle didn't vanish, it intensified, twisting with every heartbeat, reminding me of the power dynamics at play, the age difference that society would weaponize without hesitation. They wouldn't see the connection, the way her touch made me feel seen and wanted again after years of feeling invisible, branding it as something dirty and unacceptable. And part of me agreed, the shame coiling tight even as the craving overpowered it, leaving me breathless and lost in the gravity of her. Morning would bring reality crashing back, but in those candlelit hours I clung to the illusion that this could stay ours alone, a private world untouched by outside eyes. Her presence wrapped around me like a storm I had no desire to escape, even knowing the thunder of judgment loomed just beyond the horizon. The hunger had won this round, pulling me deeper into territory I once swore I'd never enter, and as the night deepened, the ache in my chest shifted from guilt to a fierce, undeniable need that terrified me more than any external voice ever could. Doubts crept in like shadows at the edge of the flame. Was this real, or just the desperate grasp of a lonely man reaching for youth and vitality? Her youth, her energy, contrasted so sharply with my own weariness, amplifying the imbalance I couldn't ignore. Society's gaze felt palpable even here, in the privacy of this house, whispering accusations that made my skin prickle with unease. Still, when her fingers intertwined with mine in the quiet aftermath, the connection hummed with a truth that defied easy labels, leaving me torn between the pull to continue and the desperate urge to retreat before it consumed us both. Until the line between care and craving blurred completely, leaving only the raw honesty of two people drawn together against all reason. I knew this changed everything, the boundary crossed in a haze of emotion and longing that left no room for pretense anymore. And as the candles burned lower, casting erratic shadows across the walls, the weight of what we'd done settled in, heavy and irreversible, pulling me forward into an uncertain dawn even as my mind whispered warnings I was no longer sure I could heed. But the dawn didn't wait. Light crept through the curtains too soon, painting the room in soft grays and golds that made everything feel exposed. She slept beside me, her breathing steady and peaceful, one arm draped loosely across my chest as if claiming the space we'd created in the dark. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the warmth of her body pressing against mine, a constant reminder of how far we'd fallen. My mind wouldn't quiet. What have I done? The question looped endlessly, tangled with flashes of her father's trusting face, the way he'd clapped me on the back at barbecues and called me brother. Society wouldn't hesitate to tear this apart, to label me the older man who couldn't control himself, who preyed on innocence under the guise of comfort. The age gap would be their weapon, sharp and unforgiving, ignoring how her touch had pulled me from the edge of drowning in loneliness. I should have slipped away then, gathered my things and driven her back before anyone noticed the shift. Instead, my hand moved of its own accord, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead with a gentleness that betrayed the chaos inside. She stirred, eyes fluttering open, and that sleepy smile curved her lips in a way that made my resolve crumble all over again. "Morning," she murmured, voice husky from sleep, her fingers tracing light patterns along my arm. The electricity of it shot through me, reigniting the hunger despite the shame burning hotter in the daylight. I pulled her closer, burying my face in the curve of her neck where the faint coconut scent still lingered, breathing her in like a man starved for air is underwater. We didn't speak of what had happened, not yet. The silence between us felt fragile, filled with the soft sounds of our breathing sisting once more, the occasional rustle of sheets as we shifted closer. Part of me waited for regret to crash over us, for her to pull back and realize the mistake of letting an old family friend cross every boundary. But she didn't. If anything, her body relaxed into mine, her head resting against my shoulder as if this was the most natural thing in the world. My chest tightened with the weight of it, all the power I held in her life, the years that separated us, the way the world would see me as the one who should have known better. They judge these things so harshly because they can't feel this, I told myself, the magnetic pull that made the empty house feel alive again. Still, the guilt gnawed, whispering that I was fooling myself, that this was nothing but a midlife crisis wrapped in forbidden warmth. Hours blurred as we stayed tangled there, the outside world pressing in with distant sounds of traffic and bird song that reminded me how temporary this cocoon was. Texts would come soon, questions from mutual friends wondering why she was still here, why her plans to return home kept shifting. Psst. My ex-wife's voice in my head echoed with suspicion, her own bitterness from the divorce coloring everything. How could something that felt like pure connection be twisted into something filthy by prying eyes? The thought made my stomach twist. Yet when she looked up at me again, eyes full of that same quiet question from the night before, I couldn't find the words to end it. I kissed her forehead, lingering there as her breath hitched softly, the almost moment stretching into something deeper that left me trembling with the knowledge that I was choosing this fire, even if it meant watching my life burn. The internal war didn't tease in the light of day. It sharpened, every caress a battle between the man I used to be, the one who fixed problems and kept distances, and the one who now craved her nearness like oxygen. Society's harsh judgment loomed larger now, the whispers about age gaps and power imbalances ringing truer in the quiet morning. They wouldn't understand the way her presence had cracked open the shell of my loneliness, making me feel wanted in a way the divorce had stolen. But I understood the risk, the way this could destroy rust built over decades, paint me as something monstrous. Still, as her hand found mine under the sheets, fingers intertwining with a tenderness that spoke louder than any confession, the craving won out again, pulling me under in waves of heat and surrender that left no room for turning back just yet. And even as the morning light grew brighter, exposing every shadow we tried to hide, I felt the pull deepen, the hunger refusing to let go despite the storm of doubt raging inside. How much longer could I pretend this was just a moment, when every touch whispered that we'd already gone too far to return unchanged? The next morning the sunlight cut through the blinds like it had something to prove, sharp and unforgiving, painting long stripes across the rumpled sheets. I sat there on the edge of the mattress, phone heavy in my hand, thumb hovering over the screen while message after message lit up. Friends asking casual questions that weren't casual at all. Why was she still parked in my driveway? Had she mentioned when she'd head back to her parents? Was everything all right over there? One from her father, the tone light on the surface but carrying that old trust now edged with something wary, like he could sense the shift without naming it. And then the voicemail notification from my ex, her voice already tight before I even pressed play, laced with the kind of suspicion that comes from knowing me too well and not trusting what loneliness can do. The words dissolving into static that still echoed in my skull. She lay beside me, breathing steady and unaware, one leg tangled lightly in the sheet. Her hair spilled across the pillow like it belonged there. The faint vanilla coconut trace still clung to the air between us, mixing with the warmer scent of sleep and shared warmth, and it pulled at something deep in my chest. Society would look at this and see nothing but wrongness. A man my age, her father's closest friend, the one who'd once helped fix her bike and cheered at her high school graduation, now tangled in sheets with her after crossing every line in the dark. They'd call it imbalance, exploitation, a desperate grasp at youth by someone who should know better. The whispers would spread like cracks in ice, family barbecues turning cold, old friends stepping back with raised eyebrows and quiet judgments. How could something that had filled the hollow ache inside me feel so pure in the moment, and yet so filthy under their gaze? I pressed my palms to my eyes, the cool floor grounding my bare feet while my mind spun through every reason this should end right now. I should have woken her gently, helped her gather her things, driven her back before the questions turned into accusations, explained it as a slip born of grief and proximity, nothing that could last. Respected the years of friendship I'd risked, the trust her family had placed in me since she was small. The power I held in her life, the experience that made me the one who should have stopped it. All of it screamed at me to do the right thing, to protect her from the storm that would come if anyone found out. They judge age gaps like this so harshly because they see the timeline as sacred, youth and maturity in their neat boxes, any overlap threatening the order they've built. Deviation means danger, means someone must be taking advantage, means the younger one couldn't possibly choose with clear eyes. I knew the narrative they'd write. Predator, midlife fool, confused girl swayed by stability after her own heartbreaks. It crushed against my ribs, heavy as the silence in the room. Yet when her eyelids fluttered and that sleepy smile touched her lips, soft and unguarded, reaching for me with the same easy trust she'd shown as a kid but now layered with something deeper, The war inside me fractured wide open. Her fingers brushed my arm, warm and certain, sending a quiet electricity humming under my skin that drowned out the louder voices for a moment. Stop. You can't keep doing this. But the thought of pulling away felt like stepping into freezing water after years of numbness, and I couldn't make myself move. Instead, I let her draw me back down, her head finding the spot against my shoulder where it fit to perfectly, her breath warm against my neck in that way that made the world narrow to just us. The coconut scent bloomed closer now, faint but insistent, wrapping around the ache like a promise I didn't deserve. The outside pressure waited, texts still buzzing faintly from the nightstand, her mother's call likely coming soon with more probing lightness. But for these stolen minutes, I chose the pull, the gravity that made the empty house feel alive again despite every warning. Days started to melt together after that, each one carrying the same fragile routine laced with tension that never quite broke. Mornings in the kitchen where she'd pad in quietly, hair still messy from sleep, pouring coffee while our shoulders brushed in the tight space by the counter. The air would thicken instantly, that invisible magnetism drawing us nearer even as I pretended to scan the headlines on my tablet. Her laugh at some small joke I made would crack through the quiet, reminding me how she'd always lit up rooms, but now it carried an undercurrent that left me breathless, heart hammering with the knowledge of what we'd become. Text kept arriving like distant thunder, friends wondering aloud why her summer plans kept extending, why she hadn't mentioned heading home. Her mother rang once, voice bright over speakerphone, while she answered with smooth half-truths about relaxing and figuring things out. Her free hand resting lightly on my knee under the table, fingers tracing idle patterns that sent heat radiating through the fabric. I sat there frozen, guilt sharpening like a blade with every word, torn between the man who'd always been the steady one, and the one now surrendering to this craving that refused to fade. I tried to voice the ending once, really tried. We sat on the couch in the living room, the same one where the rainy afternoon had first shifted everything, the old movie long forgotten. The words came out halting, heavy with the weight of what society would say. This can't keep going. People will piece it together. They'll see the years between us and assume the worst. Call me the one who should have protected you instead of letting proximity turn into this. Sigh voice cracked on the last part, the internal battle raging louder than ever. The shame of the power imbalance, the fear that her youth made her vulnerable in ways I couldn't ignore, the way the world clings to its rules about when desire is allowed to bloom. They judge so harshly because these connections force them to question their own boundaries, the neat stories of appropriate timing and equal footing that keep everything safe and predictable. Any crack in that facade feels like a threat, something to shame back into place before it spreads. But she turned to me with eyes that held no hesitation, only a quiet strength that caught me off guard, whispering that she wasn't the little girl who'd called me uncle anymore, that this felt real to her in a way nothing else had, not some fleeting rebellion or confusion from college life. Her hand stayed on my arm, not demanding, just present, the warmth seeping through and stretching the almost moment until the sentence died on my lips. The fire didn't extinguish, it smoldered there between us, fed by every shared glance and unspoken understanding, even as doubt licked at the edges like wind against embers. I could feel the storm gathering outside, friends starting to connect dots, family gatherings that would never feel the same, the labels ready to stick. Dirty old man chasing youth, young woman lost in something she didn't fully grasp. Yet in the quiet of the house, with her presence turning ordinary hours into something charged and breathing, the judgment felt like rain on a window we kept closed tight. I didn't make the drive back to her parents' place. I chose the nearness instead, the one that had cracked open the shell of my post-divorce emptiness and let light in where there'd only been shadows. We kept things contained as best we could, stolen conversations in the kitchen, evenings where the television hummed low while our hands found each other without thinking, but the knowledge sat heavy that this couldn't hide forever. The world outside pressed closer with every unanswered text, every casual inquiry that carried weight. I knew the ache of what was coming. The confrontations, the disappointment in her father's eyes, the way society would frame it as something broken and shameful, rather than two people finding solace in the wrong place at the wrong time. They wouldn't see the way her laugh still pulled me from the fog, or how her quiet defiance made me question the rules I'd lived by for so long. Here I am now, the weight of it all pressing down even as her touch lingers in memory, a bittersweet gravity that refuses to release its hold. I don't pretend to have answers for why the world judges these gaps so fiercely, only that this connection carved through my loneliness in ways nothing else could, leaving me changed in the ruins. The hunger remains unresolved and haunting, whispering that we've stepped beyond the point of simple return, into a space where every choice carries the echo of what might have been if we'd listened to the warnings. Maybe that's the deepest confession. Not the crossing, but the staying, even when the storm brews just beyond the door. Drop your thoughts if you've ever felt this same pull, the kind everyone labels wrong but that feels truer than the safety they offer. Have you ever chosen the ache despite knowing it could unravel everything? Tell me. In these quiet admissions, perhaps the isolation softens just a little, and we remember we're all just trying to feel something real in a world quick to condemn the fire that warms us. The sunlight kept shifting across the room as the hours slipped by, each beam a reminder that time wasn't waiting for us to decide. I watched her move through the house with that effortless grace she'd always had, now laced with a new awareness that made every glance feel loaded. She'd reach for a glass in the cabinet, her arm brushing past mine, and the proximity alone would send a tremor through me, the kind that made my breath catch in my throat. Society's voice grew louder in those moments, echoing judgments I'd heard in passing conversations over the years. How age differences like ours were red flags, signs of manipulation or immaturity on one side and desperation on the other. They couldn't see the way her presence had become my anchor, pulling me from the depths of divorce's aftermath where every day had felt like wading through fog. Instead, they'd painted in harsh strokes, ignoring the quiet ways we'd always connected, the history that made this feel less like a sudden fall and more like a slow unraveling of threads we'd ignored for too long. I found myself replaying fragments of our talks late into the nights, her voice soft against the dark, sharing pieces of her college life that she'd never told anyone else. The way she'd lean in closer when the conversation turned personal, her knee pressing lightly against mine on the couch, created an electricity that hummed beneath the surface. It wasn't loud or demanding, just there, constant, making the air feel heavier, warmer. My mind would split then, one part screaming to remember the years between us, the way her father trusted me like a brother, the expectations that came with being the older, steadier figure in her life. The other part, the one winning more often now, surrendered to the pull, letting the warmth of her nearness wash over the guilt like waves smoothing rough stones. Why do they judge it so harshly? I wondered in those silences. Because it challenges the neat lines they've drawn, the idea that connection should fit tidy categories of age and experience, never spilling over into something raw and unexpected. One afternoon the rain returned, tapping against the windows like impatient fingers, and we ended up back on that couch again, the space between us shrinking without either of us acknowledging it. Her head found its way to my shoulder once more, hair tickling my skin with that familiar softness, carrying the faint coconut hint that always undid me a little further. We didn't speak much. Just breathed together, the rhythm sissing in a way that felt dangerously natural. Outside, the world kept turning with its questions and suspicions, texts lighting up my phone with increasing frequency, each one a small crack in the fragile bubble we'd built. Her parents were seeped through in careful wording, friends' curiosity masking deeper concern. I knew it was only a matter of time before the pieces connected, before the labels stuck and the isolation set in. Yet when her fingers intertwined with mine, tentative but sure, the craving overpowered the fear, leaving me trembling with the knowledge that walking away now would feel like tearing something vital from my chest. The internal war intensified with every passing day, a constant tug between the man who'd built a life on responsibility and the one awakening to this forbidden warmth. I'd catch myself staring at her across the room, remembering the little girl who'd run to me with scraped knees, and the contrast would hit like cold water, amplifying the shame. They seep our imbalances where I feel only mutual surrender, I told myself, but the doubt lingered, whispering that maybe society had a point, that I should have been the one to draw the line. Still, her sleepy smiles in the morning, the way she'd seek me out with that quiet hunger in her eyes, eroded my resolve bit by bit. The house, once echoing with emptiness, now hummed with a different kind of life, charged and intimate, making the outside judgments feel distant, almost unreal. Even as the pressure mounted, with more calls going unanswered, excuses growing thinner, I couldn't bring myself to end it. Sitting on the edge of the bed again one evening, watching her sleep with the sheet draped loosely, I rehearsed the words in my head. The gentle explanation, the doctor back, the return to safe distances. But when she stirred and reached for me, her touch pulling me back into the circle of warmth, the decision slipped away once more. I chose her nearness, the ache that came with it, knowing full well the cost. The fire burned quietly, not consuming everything at once but smoldering with the promise of eventual flames. Here I am now, still caught in the tangle, the weight of society's harsh gaze pressing down like an unseen hand. The connection feels real, carved from loneliness and years of unspoken closeness, yet it leaves me suspended in this unresolved space. The hunger doesn't fade. It lingers, bittersweet and haunting, a reminder that we've crossed into territory where return feels impossible. What if the world is right, and this is just a beautiful mistake? Or what if it's the truest thing I've felt in years? The questions swirl without answers, leaving only the echo of her breath against my skin and the pull that refuses to let go. Drop your thoughts if you've ever felt the same pull, the kind everyone labels wrong but that feels truer than the safety they offer. Have you ever chosen the ache despite knowing it could unravel everything? Tell me, in these quiet admissions, perhaps the isolation softens just a little, and we remember we were all just trying to feel something real in a world quick to condemn the fire that warms.